Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome on the MCC Budapest Lectures and Media of the Visegrad 4 countries. I'm Fanni Surjányi, Head of Research at MCC, and I will be your guide and moderator for tonight. When posting on social media, please use hashtag MCC Budapest Lectures. Interpreter devices can be found at the entrance at the registration desk. Please don't forget to return them at the end. What has changed on media markets of Central Eastern European countries since the fall of the Iron Curtain? We will seek answers with our remarkable speakers of tonight. Lukáš Kovanda, Czech economist and author, chief economist at Czech Fund. Please welcome him. Łukasz Warzecha, Polish journalist and political commentator of weekly Rzeczy. And Zoltán Szalai, publisher and editor-in-chief of the Hungarian weekly Mondiner. Please welcome him. Media markets of Central Eastern European countries has changed substantially after the regime changes. Western, especially German capital, huge publishing houses easily entered and conquered the markets, the media markets, which were newly opened and poorly regulated at this time. Some 60 or somewhere even 80% of media outlets were sold out. I'm turning to our panelists and asking you to analyze this situation. So how did the privatization go at this time? And whether the German conquest was good business or abuse of position? What were the similarities and what were the differences between these countries? Anyone who would like to start, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for a nice introduction and for inviting me here to take a part in this discussion. I'm from Czech Republic, so I will focus naturally on the development in our country. And I have to say that I see a German capital which was very active in our country from the 90s until, let's say, first half of this decade. I think it was beneficial for our media market because the Germans, not just Germans, but for example, Americans, US capital as well, they brought know-how how to do modern media, because as you probably know as well, to some extent from the period of communism, before the fall of the Iron Curtain and the collapse of Soviet Union and Velvet Revolution in our country, in the Czech Republic, the media, at least in our country, were under the scrutiny of the party, of the Communist Party, and so there was a monopoly in the media market, which was of course very bad for a society as a whole. I remember the Chernobyl tragedy. It's connected with the media and information spreading in the Soviet Union as well. But I was child at the time, and my health was under some put on some risk because we didn't know that there was the tragedy. We didn't know about the Chernobyl explosion. We only after some few days, because I had an aunt, family relative in Britain, so she called that there is probably some problem in Soviet Union, so do not go outside for walks because it's potentially dangerous because of radioactivity all over the country. After some days, it was confirmed by the Soviet Union and finally by Czechoslovak at the time media. But compared to today's situation, it was a completely different picture because right now every tragedy in the world, be it Fukushima tragedy, nuclear explosion, be it coronavirus right now in China, we can see it in the real time, not just because completely different structure of media, but because of technological development since that time. So the landscape changed hugely, the media landscape in our country more rapidly than in western part of the European Union, and I think without the know-how from the abroad, from the western countries, the shift or the change or the revolutionary change, I would even say, from the monopolistic, communistic media to the market one of today's, I think this change, this rapid shift wouldn't be so smooth and so swift as it finally, I think, was, because I think it's a success how the media in Czech Republic, in Hungary, in Poland, in Slovakia look right now, because I think they are pretty much comparable to media in the western part of the European Union or United States. Thank
you. I welcome also everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I think in Hungary it had two sides. On the one hand, what you described in those days in Czechoslovakia in 1990, it happened very much the same in Hungary, that these outlets, these big media outlets, mainly German and some American and British, came to Hungary and entered the market. And of course they had this knowledge, they had to know how to make real media business. On the other hand, they brought this market side and this market view to the Hungarian media, which was that for these media houses was important that the newspapers go on and the content will produce day by day, even if they buy it on the one day and yesterday it was a previous ownership, they have to produce the content and it can't stop. And that's why I think it was, on the other hand, a bit damaging to the Hungarian media because the old communist editor-in-chiefs and redactors, they still in power. They still, you couldn't change it from one day to the other. It's very similar to the political elite, that you can produce. József Antal, the first Hungarian prime minister, said that, okay, if you had make a revolution, you can change the political elite, but you can't produce a political elite just like a media elite within one day, not even 2, 3, 5 years. So, and because that's my one reason of mine, and the second one is that because these companies, they wanted revenues, they wanted to make money with these new outlets, with their new newspapers mainly. Their interest was that everything is going on, and it caused that in the most cases, or in a lot of cases, and a large percentage of the cases, the old communist redactors and the old communist journalists still in power, and they worked, their work went on, and of course their view didn't change with the new owner, which was, I think, not the best for the new Hungarian democracy in those days.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I will tell you just in a moment, I will tell you a story based on my own experience as far as foreign ownership of the media in Poland is concerned. But first, let me tell you that in Poland, I don't know how it was in Hungary or in the Czech Republic, but Czechoslovakia, at the beginning of the 1990s. But at the beginning of the 1990s in Poland, there was, I wouldn't say that a complete change of the journalistic elites, but I would say that the post-communist or communist typical journalistic elite was to a large extent exchanged by new people coming into it. And I can't tell you exactly what percentage of former communist times journalists stayed in their profession, but I would say this is just what I think, what I suppose, but I would say that this was like perhaps 30%, and now it's even less. So I don't think this factor counts in Poland. And now about foreign ownership of media in Poland. I myself worked for 10 years at Fakt Daily newspaper. Fakt Daily newspaper was started in 2003, and it was owned first by Axel Springer Verlag, then after uniting with Ringier, a Swiss company, it's owned by Ringier Axel Springer Verlag. Ringier Axel Springer now owns in Poland also onet.pl, which is one of the 3 biggest Polish horizontal internet portals, and also Newsweek Poland, which is a weekly, by the way, fiercely anti-government weekly. But going back to Fakt, we started in 2003, and from the day one, the newspaper and media outlet which attacked us the most, I mean us, the fact, was Adam Michnik's Gazeta Wyborcza. Why was that so? Leftist newspaper, of course, now very much anti-governmental too. It was because they sensed that there is a new, very, very potent and strong player who is not attached to local mechanisms thanks to foreign ownership. And they were right, because after, I think, 3 or 4 months, Fakt became the biggest Polish newspaper, whereas before it was Gazeta Wyborcza, and it stayed on the first place since then. Another wave of very fierce attack from Gazeta Wyborcza was when Fakt started to publish its opinion pages. It was unusual because the newspaper was based, as I said, on the German Bild, which is a tabloid newspaper. It was a tabloid newspaper. Nevertheless, there was an idea to add opinion pages to that tabloid newspaper, which was quite unusual. I think it was the such unique idea on the scale of Europe, or perhaps even worldwide. So we started to publish opinion columns, and my job at Fakt newspaper was for almost those 10 years as a columnist. And this was another threat for Gazeta Wyborcza and for its monopoly on people's minds. So my personal experience of those 10 years working for a newspaper which was foreign-owned, German-owned, was not only a good one, it was an excellent one. It happened, I can say, just perhaps 3 or 4 times when I was asked by someone perhaps not to publish my opinion piece right now because, for example, we are trying right now to have an interview with the Prime Minister, so don't be very critical about him right now. When we have that interview, you can publish your piece. And it happened only, as I say, 3 or 4 times during those 10 years. Nobody tried to influence me. I was completely free in writing what I wanted. I worked there during communist rule up to 2005. Then there was the first part, PIS party ruled. It was between 2005, 2007. And that was civic platform rule. So I can dwell on that subject later on further, but I can tell you that in my opinion there is no correlation whatsoever between the ownership of a media outlet and its line. We have in Poland now Polish-owned media outlets which are leftist, liberal, anti-governmental, and we have very balanced and reliable media outlets which are foreign-owned. So it's very, very difficult and risky to shape a rule of the thumb that when you have a media outlet which is foreign-owned, it promotes foreign interests, or it's leftist or anti-conservative, and so on and so on. And I would say that those who form such opinions, they just want to promote their own political interest.
I pretty much agree or share the Polish experience, because I do not see, or I haven't seen the Western capital as a factor that would somehow hinder the shift from the old school communist elite journalists to a new generation of journalists that were active and that have been active since the regime change at the beginning of 90s. So I think that's not the factor that would somehow damage this, I think, very welcome development. I would even say that in Czech Republic, the percentage of the old communist journalists is even less, about 20%, compared to Poland. So I think the Western ownership of the media has been beneficial for our country. Of course, it has had some negative aspects, but in general, I think the benefits are much higher than the costs.
How do you see the question of media balance? Do you think that it was created after the regime change and the entrance of these Western big publishing houses, or rather strengthened the previous leftist bias?
Balance of
mainly
political views?
So among media outlets, was it already a balance, because there were right wings and left wings, and also there were conservatives or liberals, or there was a bias in general and leaning to one or to the other direction?
So this time let me begin. Of course, we observed, at first we observed definitely general bias towards the left, and I think we would all agree, as we are sitting here, that a very general rule worldwide is that media are rather left-leaning than conservative-leaning or right-leaning. Of course, we can discuss the definitions, discuss what is conservative, what is right-wing, what is left-wing, but let us put that aside and use those words just in the most common sense. But it started, I think, to change in the years 2000. Although in Poland there were some wasted opportunities, like, for example, we had TV pools with a permit, media permit, owned by the Franciscan order, but the people who created TV polls just wasted money, and they wasted the opportunity. It was in the years 2000. Then we had, for example, a network of Catholic radio stations called TV Plus. Don't mix it with TV Pulse, it's very similar. And it was sold to one of the other private media companies. Another wasted opportunity. But after 2007, which was the date of the change of power in Poland, conservative media started to pop up. And I would say that in general now, the general picture in Poland now is perhaps still a little bit biased on the left side, or to the left side, but it's much, much more balanced than before. But we have another problem, and I don't know if I can speak about that now, or perhaps we'll put it to the further part of the discussion, which is the problem of public media and their isolation from political influence. Because if we speak about balance of the media in general, we must also speak about public media. And I think one of the greatest failures of the Central European countries, not all of them, because I know Central European countries in which they succeeded to do it, for example, more or less in Estonia, but as far as Poland is concerned, definitely, this was a failure of creating a kind of firewall between the political sphere and public media. And of course, we all know that such a firewall will never be tight-proof. But there are countries who tried to create as much a tight-proof firewall as possible, like the UK, like Germany. In Germany, by the way, this is the case of the Allies' influence after the Second World War, and the system of the German media was actually constructed by the Allies. I mean, of course, the Western German system of the media. But in Poland, we failed to create such a firewall. And the result is that if we speak about balance of the views, it was always very, very difficult to speak about balanced views in public media in Poland, because public media were always treated as a political prey. And that problem exaggerated after 2015, unfortunately, when in 2016 a non-constitutional body called the Council of National Media was created with an ordinary regulation of the parliament, and this body has members elected only by the president and the majority in the lower house of the parliament, and it deals with electing the bosses of public media in Poland, so radio, and public TV. No contest is obligatory. So in fact, we have a situation when the boss of the public radio and public TV is actually directly elected by politicians, who of course have their very, very strong influence over him. And this is perhaps not unusual, because everybody who works in media in Poland knows stories about bosses of public TV answering phones coming from the prime minister, ministers, the office of the president, and so on and so on. The thing is that the reactions of the bosses in various periods was not the same. Some of them listened carefully and obeyed orders. Some of them told those politicians to just hang up. Now, if I may say so, I think we rather have that previous pattern. So Polish public media now, if we speak about balance, are entirely subject to what the government wants them to do. And why am I speaking about that? Because there is a concept, and this is also my question to you, because I'm interested in whether you have similar problems in the Czech Republic and Hungary. There is a concept in Poland which I would call dissipated pluralism, which means that people who defend existing solutions, they say that yes, that is true, that there is no balance in the public media, and public media are extremely biased towards the government's position. But if we take a look at the general picture, we have various media. So in fact, we have that dissipated pluralism. We have media who are staunchly anti-government, and we have staunchly pro-government media, including public media. So now the question is, of course, whether we think that this is a real pluralism or not. I'm rather critical about that notion, But this is an interesting concept, how to defend such a situation. So this is also my question to the other participants, whether you know something like that from your countries.
I answer also your question, but back to the very beginning, I would say I was also a child in 1990. I was at the elementary school, but I still remember and I studied this media history of Hungary very closely, and I always wanted to understand. And even now, probably we always forget how important the role of media in the changes of Hungary was. Even if we come back to the old, that was this definition of the media war after the changes 1991, 92 in Hungary between the two biggest parties, József Antal MDF and the left liberal opposition. And the elected president of the state media was Elemér Hankis, who was a very bright person. But I would say that state media, and it's also important that we were before the digital switch. So there was only the state digital media, and on the other hand, the newspapers, the printed news outlets on the market. So I would say in those days, the media pluralism didn't existed. So I would even say that 80 to 85% was very much left liberal, and only a very small percentage represented the government of those days, or ideologically said the conservative thinking and point of view. It changed step by step. So I would say that even the 2 years in 2000 looked a bit differently, but we had a very much left-wing proportion in the media.
Sorry to interrupt, but it was a very interesting chapter when the Prime Minister couldn't enter into the media and his speech couldn't appear in the media these days.
I think how József Antal, the first Prime Minister, was treated by the public media in those days, that was, I can't say anything else, but it was a... Okay, I could only say very harsh things about this, but it was not media pluralism what they represented. On the other hand, back to your question, if we look on public state media of today, I think it's not in a very good shape. So the Hungarian news part of the television is not in a very good shape and representing not a very good quality of journalism. On the other hand, we are after the digital switch, so we have a lot of television channels now, left-wing and right-wing, and also a lot of entertainment channels who sometimes also show and also broadcast political or ideological content. And we shouldn't forget that we are we are in the internet times. So if we compare the importance of television and radio to the 90s and now, it plays a much smaller role, and it's not as important as it was before. Now I see Hungary that we have a quite balanced situation. The state public media is like under every government, very much representing the governmental opposition, the governmental opinion, and not very much the opposition. On the other hand, I think if you are in Hungary now and you want to have the knowledge and you want to understand what is going on in Hungary and what is going on outside of Hungary globally, then you have the reach that you can enter different websites, you can watch different televisions, you can buy different weeklies where you can have the information that you want to know, which is, I think, much more plural than it was in the 90s after the changes.
Let me say a few words firstly about the left or right leaning of our media in the Czech Republic, and then about the relationship of the public media, in our case Czech television and Czech radio, and government officials. And maybe a few words about the digital switch, as you put it. First, the thing about left leaning of Czech media, of course, there is this bias, as in Poland or in Hungary, maybe. And I think this bias has been stronger and stronger. During the 1990s, I guess, maybe, but I was a child, or not child, but very young, and I was not a frequent consumer of the media, especially in the first half of this decade. So I have a feeling, an impression that at the time journalists were in general less left leaning. The bias was there was no bias of this type. Maybe they were all almost right leaning, but after some time there has been a change and a new generation of journalists, people that really started their career after 2000. I think they are more left-leaning than the generation of 1990s. And there are some theories why that happened, and one of them is that with the advent of the internet, because the Czech media market is small, with the advent of internet or digital switch, there has been a downward pressure on salaries. So during the 1990s, Czech journalists were paid quite well compared to average salary in the society, on average wage. But with the advent of internet, this has changed, and now the salaries amongst especially young journalists in the Czech Republic are very weak or very low compared to national average, even compared to national average. So many of them see market as the force that it's not so friendly to them, and maybe that's part of the explanation of their left-leaning, because they want to somehow to get market under the control, because it's not favorable for them, as was for the generation of the 1990s. Maybe, I don't know, that's one of the theories I have heard about this, but there is definitely the change, and there is the bias, the left bias amongst our journalists is stronger than 10 years or even 20 years ago, definitely 20 years ago. That's one thing, and second thing, the interesting thing about the public media in our country, they are still very critical to our politicians, to our government. I think that's a major difference compared to Poland or Hungary, because very often the most critical media, most critical towards government officials, is Czech television, public company. And there is stronger and stronger pressure from some politicians to get the Czech television under their control. So to made it or change it from public media into state media. And government, Poland or Polish and Hungarian situation have been seen by them, by those politicians who would like to get Czech television under their control, as role models. Because look at the situation in Poland and Hungary. And for the Czech television journalists and many others, that they don't want, of course, be under the control of the government officials. So examples of Hungary and Poland are examples where they definitely wouldn't like to go. They showed they They claim, for example, look what's happening in Poland, what's happening in Hungary. There's a big problem that those media are not public anymore, that these are state media under the control of politicians. We must do everything in the Czech Republic to prevent this from occurring in our country. So the situation is, I think, more and more tense and critical. And just now there are elections into the boards, board of Czech television and board of Czech radio, and it's very hot debate about this, because of course via the board members, newly elected board members, politicians can make some pressure on the media, on the respective media, especially on Czech television. So there is a big debate right now in the Czech Republic about who will be in the board, and of course there are many, about 100 people who would like to be in the board. It's about 10 or 15 people, and some of them really want to have Czech television under the control in the fashion of Poland or Hungary. So it depends. My own guess is that there will be no such a development as in these two countries, Poland and Hungary, but the pressure is stronger and stronger, and it will be very interesting.
May I just add a few words? First of all, I would like to say that the main argument against the concept of dissipated pluralism, in Poland at least, brought up by the opposition mainly, of course, is that public radio and public TV are paid for by all the citizens of various political views. So effectively, those people of various political views pay for government propaganda, the opposition says, and they do have a point. And just a few days ago, the Polish parliament voted through 2 billion zlotys for the public media in Poland from the budget. There was a big political fuss about it. If you take a look, I don't know if you can find that information in Hungarian media, but it's very interesting. There was one of the deputies of the ruling party who, after the vote, showed this gesture to the others. And there was really a big fuss about it, not really favorable for PIS party. And another thing, quite interesting, and I think quite problematic, is what will happen to the Polish public media after the switch of power, which of course is inevitable. We don't know when, but at some point it will happen. We live in a democracy. If we look back at the situation after the civic platform win in 2007, it was quite interesting because Donald Tusk, who was then the prime minister, didn't bother to press on the change of the bosses of public media for 3 years. So the boards of public TV and public radio were not changed until 2010, after the crash of presidential plane in Smolensk in Russia. It was probably because Donald Tusk thought that pro-government private media were so strong that it was not necessary to make any fuss about public media. So for 3 years during civic platform rule, we had a very exotic, I would say, alliance in the public media of the Peasants' Party, PIS Party, and left-wing party. But now there is that question about what will happen to Polish public media after the switch of power. And there are 3 possibilities. The first one is that there will be some kind of remedy, of mending those public media, of setting them right, of making them more reliable, more balanced. But this is quite unlikely, I would say. Another version, another option is that there will be just a bunch of people associated with the future camp of ruling camp, and they will come, they will sack everybody who is now in the public media, and they will take their places. This is quite probable. And another possibility, the third one, is that there will be just a privatization of all the public media in Poland, or just part of it. And this is also quite likely. And why is that so? Because the example of how public media in Poland look now is so damaging that the future power camp might think that it is just not worth mending, or not worth putting their own people in the public media. It just should be disbanded, privatized, because there will be, in that way, there will be no similar problem in the future. We will just not have public media, and private media anyway are more left-wing and more liberal, so they are okay for us. And this is the danger that I think people who are in power in Poland right now just don't think about, and that's a shame.
I would like just add one thing that we also have to talk about. In Hungary, I think was the situation that the public media was always switched by the next government. So when they came into power, we shouldn't forget, for example, Nap TV. It was a morning news show in the Hungarian television. It was privately owned and made by a private company, which delivered a very left-wing and absolutely unbalanced morning show for decades on the Hungarian television. And Fidesz was in power between in the first Orbán government. They fired this company. In 2002, they immediately came back from the small left-wing cable television and back to the public television and created the morning show. On the other hand, I think it's also important to talk about that the politicians, and we always talk about public media, how important it is. It is very important if you look on the Western European market, BBC or ORF in Austria, or ARD and ZDF. They are very influential in these countries. I not really much know the datas of the public television in Poland and in the Czech Republic, but the importance of public media in Hungary is gone back a lot. If we compare it to 1997, when the first private channels appeared, they overtook the media market, the television media market. Then the cable televisions, they overtook the media market, and the public television is not as influential, not as important as it was before, and they really couldn't get on this track how to create new media content and how to create new products which they can have and which they can keep their readership and mainly their viewers.
There is an interesting situation in Czech Republic because Czech public TV, Czech television, as I mentioned before, is more successful than private TVs. In the, for example, very popular right now is dancing show in the Czech Republic, where our celebrities are dancing, and it's a competition, a contest who will win, and it's aired or broadcasted by Czech television. So this typical private TV show or format is run by a public TV, which is one of the arguments of the critics of the Czech TV. They asked it to be under the state control. Why should Czech TV run this private TV shows? Why should the taxpayers pay for this when it can be aired on private TV normally? Which I think is an argument that has some merit. On the other hand, in the sphere of typical public service broadcasting, meaning especially news and documentaries and so on, in this field, Czech television is still behind the private TV, especially a private TV called Televize Nova. Nova TV is still has still more high rates, as Donald Trump would put it, higher rates than the state public Czech TV, which I think is not a very welcome situation, because I think it should be really opposite, because of course we are paying, or I'm paying Czech TV not for dancing shows, but to get information, and unbiased information. And I think in this regard it's fine, and I'm quite satisfied, and I think many criticism of Czech TV are not well-founded. But maybe when there would be a change in its budget, less money on these shows, or dancing shows, and more money on documentaries and debates, political debates and news especially, I would be very happy with the development. And maybe it will be then easier for Czech TV to somehow shield itself from the criticism and from the heightened pressure from part of the politicians, be it in opposition or in government, as I was speaking before. Thank you.
Let me just add one thing, because it's quite funny what the differences are between the Czech Republic and Poland. As I said, in Poland, public TV is financed directly from the budget. And its newest and most intensely advertised project is a film produced by the Polish public TV, a film about the life of a Polish star of disco polo, which is a special Polish genre of disco music, which began in the 1990s. And the protagonist of this film, he's called Zenek Martyniuk, and Zenek Martyniuk is the favorite hero of the president of the Polish public TV, Jacek Kurski. So in fact, Polish public TV, taking public money, makes such projects which are the subject of criticism in the Czech Republic. And the president of the Polish public TV is absolutely proud about it. And he says that this is what people want, this is what we will give them, Zenek Martyniuk is the best.
You already touched upon the digital switch, or to put it in another way, the online revolution in the information space. And it probably resulted what we have today, a general demand for free and fair information for everybody. And what we have in many cases are the news factories, because many online portals use the information produced by news agencies. And there are several players on the market, also in social media, blogs. Almost everybody can enter the media markets today. And I would like to ask you, whose responsibility to provide this free and fair information, whether it's a legitimate demand to have it for free, and to provide media plurality? Is it of the state or anybody else?
Well, I think there is no simple answer to that. First, we all know that traditional media have problems with money, and fewer people do more for less money. This is a general rule. We have the, as I would say, digital modern media that sometimes do present contents which are absent from traditional media, and I myself work for one such medium, which is an internet platform called wsensie.pl, an internet TV, and I am able to make interviews there, which I probably would not be able to do on public TV or any private TV. But at the same time, I think that there are things and kinds or sorts of information which cannot be provided by such digital modern media and should be provided by traditional media. The problem is, as I said, that fewer people with less knowledge do more for less money. We have very strong time pressure or time contest among the media outlets. So there is always a pressure to publish information first, to be the first ones to publish a piece of information. And of course, quality suffers with that. And we also have another problem, which we of course can speak in more detail further on, which is political involvement of traditional media, of course of digital modern media too, but first of all of traditional media, which also has an influence on the quality of provided information. So in fact, it's very, very difficult to answer your question. And I just don't know the answer. I only know that the situation in the media has been constantly becoming worse and worse. And when I sometimes am invited to speak to students, not necessarily students of journalism in Poland, but students of some other faculties, I always ask them, is there anyone among you who wants to become a journalist? And if there is someone, I always say, I strongly discourage you. Do not become a journalist, because this might be a profession without future. Of course, this is a very gloomy look and gloomy opinion, but that's what I think. I only hope that I'll be able to be a journalist until I die, but I'm not sure about that.
I would encourage students to be a journalist, because it's really much fun and it really creates a lot of value. If we look on the digital age, the content that we can reach and that we can get raised in the skies, so we can reach a lot more content that we had previously. On the other hand, the market value of this content is going back, especially if you look on Hungary. There is a lot of free content since the internet is there, and the internet content was created mainly by not the big media houses but new players. If you look on Index, Origo, so the big Hungarian news sites in the years after 2000, 2002, 2005, these new media houses, they were not connected to one of the print media outlets, and they produced free content, which I think cannibalized the market. So when you provide only free online content and you try to be on the market only through advertisement, and you don't have any other revenue stream, it can't go in the good direction. On the other hand, I think print media and the quality that you produce in a print media and that you produce in the online media is very different. And the value of the content is going very much to this online-like content. Everything will be, also the print media and radio content will be online-like, which is, I think, not very good for human health, because you need different kind of sources, different kind of texts that you want to, and different kind of products that you want to reach. I think a third image of all of this is local content. These big media houses online, a lot of these houses are producing nationwide content, and the local content is going back and back, and it will be not financed by nobody. And there is a tendency, if you look on Austria, Germany, if you look on the Scandinavian countries, that the state is giving aid not just for the public media, but it is giving aid for print content, it is giving aid for local contents, for hyper-local content, which is targeting small, really small groups, and also very specialized contents that will never have a market value, or such a market value that they can have a zero balance on their balance sheet after the end of the year. And through the internet, and also through the development of Facebook and YouTube and all the other things, we have a lot of things that we can reach. The market value of all this content is going back, because they are mainly produced for nothing, but they can also earn nothing with this content, and which is going to that altogether, I think there is a shrinking of a lot of advantages of media that we had previously. But I think, and back to public media, which comes to my mind, I studied in Germany, in Heidelberg for years, and I watch a lot of German television, and especially if I watch, there are these talk shows in the German media. There are 4 big talk shows which are very much ruling the public media and very popular. But if you look on them, how they think, it's not very much going towards pluralism, and how they, let's say, if you look on the Thuringia elections these days and how German public media reacted to that, it's very shaky. I wouldn't call it very much balanced, and you can get every information from the public media. On the other hand, I'm not very happy that AFD achieved this result, but that's democracy. So I think it's an overall problem of all of these contents, and through the digital development, it will go along this direction. And we didn't talk about the rule of Facebook. I don't know how it is in your outlet, but I think Mondiner is never posting something very harsh or very, we don't use words which are very harsh or not nice. But we often get a ban that you can't post this, and I look it and I really can't say why, and you can't get any question. It's just, and it's also not going to this direction of pluralism, and even I can't influence it. I can't do anything because someone is sitting in Berlin or in Dublin, and you even can't communicate.
I can just answer your question. Of course, we have that problem with 2 big digital actual monopolists, which are Facebook and Google. Google including YouTube, of course, which is owned by Google. My platform that I spoke about before, Sensie.pl, was banned for, I think, about 2 weeks on YouTube, just because 2 of my colleagues in their conversation quoted Archbishop Jędraszewski, conservative archbishop in Poland, opinion about the LGBT ideology. And Polish government said a couple of years ago, the PIS government, that they would do something about it. They would bring about special procedures to appeal of such bans. They will discuss the issue with Google and with Facebook, but they actually have done nothing. And we still have that problem with, I must call it censorship, because this is a kind of censorship. Censorship without appeal and without explanation, and it happens more and more often. I myself remember writing a couple of months ago an article about that in our weekly do Rzeczy. And if you take a look at the internal workings of Google and Facebook, you will of course notice that these 2 firms are definitely left-leaning, so it's no surprise that the censorship touches above all conservative contents.
In the Czech Republic, increasingly, there has been a trend that content or online content, if you want to need it, if you want to use it, you need to pay for it. So paywalls are more and more common. When you compare the situation today with the situation 2 years ago, there is big change, even bigger when you compare it with the situation 5 or 10 years ago, and almost all online outlets, or all media outlets online in Czech Republic were for free. That was very damaging for Czech journalism because, as my colleague from Poland said, these young journalists had to do more and more for less and less money, because you need to be more and more on time for less and less money, thanks to or because of the competition and lower income from advertisement. And there is very interesting situation right now where many media or high quality media are behind the paywall, and many so-called disinformation or fake news media are for free. So for many people, those free fake news media are of course more accessible than the official or not official, but let's call them traditional media, or media that really do not they do not use fake news or disinformation. So when you have this asymmetry and fake news are more accessible than the real news, I think it's a big problem for our society. But it's very difficult to really distinguish amongst those so-called fake news media, because we have in our country, for example, Sputnik media, probably you have it in Poland as well. And of course, this media is of Russian origin, and there is for free in our country, and there is a strong bias towards some interests of Russian government, and some political parties in the opposition political parties in the Czech Republic as well. But there is a very dangerous stereotype right now to claim that almost everything that is of this Sputnik 1 style is automatically fake news media. So, for example, when there is a debate about the German elections in Thuringia and the success of AfD party, if you say, as you said, that it's democracy, in the Czech Republic right now it would be seen almost as a pro-Russian propaganda, because you are defending, like Sputnik, for example, you are defending some pro-Russian or AfD parties that is really something like pro-Russian party in the eyes of many traditional media, those well-established media that are increasingly behind the paywall, though. So it's a very interesting situation, and I think very potentially very harmful for the debate within our society, because there are opinion bubbles, and the polarization in the society in the Czech Republic, or in general public, I think it's stronger and stronger, and I think it's because of these media bubbles. The right one are behind the paywall, and the wrong one are for free, and they are definitely for free because they are paid by Russians. I'm putting it maybe too simplistically, but I think that's the general trend right now in the Czech Republic, and maybe in your countries as well. I don't know.
Well, this is very, very interesting what you have just said. And let me add that I am a great admirer and proponent of free speech, and I think that we have to do everything to protect free speech because it is in danger right now. And I think that there are two notions which are especially dangerous for freedom of speech. First, this is the notion of fake news. Second, this is the notion of hate speech. Because they are so general that, in fact, if any government, if any politician is starting to speak about legally punishing fake news or legally punishing or banning hate speech, they will be able, I mean politicians or anyone who is in power, will be able to include into any of these two notions anything that is uncomfortable for them. And this, in fact, luckily it hasn't happened in Poland yet, and I hope it will not happen. But there was a politician of the ruling party who about 2 or 3 years ago said that he would produce a regulation on fake news. The problem was that in his eyes, everything that was uncomfortable for the ruling party was fake news. And the same thing on the other side of the spectrum, I mean the left side of the spectrum, is about hate speech. As you well know, you can easily include almost any decisive opinion into the realm of hate speech and censor it. And this is exactly what Facebook and Google have been doing, because they usually use the category of hate speech to introduce censorship against conservative opinion.
I think there is this bias in our country as well, that of course, because they are international companies, Google and Facebook, the same policy they promote in countries like Poland or Hungary. They are promoting it in Czech Republic, and there is this bias as well. And I think that's one of the reasons why the media that are so-called fake news media are increasingly popular amongst the Czech public, even though they are said that these are the bad news media or wrong media by official one, or some politicians, or majority of politicians even say, or it's maybe half and half, I don't know. But generally left-leaning media, traditional, well-established media, almost everything that is not in that is not aligning with their worldview is hate media or hate speech or Russian paid media. But general public has been increasingly reluctant to accept this view, and that's the reason behind the growing popularity of the so-called fake news media. Of course, many of them really are fake news media, but some of them are not. And it's really difficult to distinguish amongst those media. But when, for example, there is a conservative think tank called Občanský institute, it's well-established think tank. It was started at the beginning of 1990s, and many times and increasingly it's being said about this think tank it's pro-Russian, but it's not pro-Russian. It has just conservative opinions, but the agenda or the social bubbles, as I said before, and the censorship of Google and Facebook, I think have been very helpful in creating the impression that almost everything which is not of left-leaning origin or this type is automatically fake news or some kind of pro-Russian or Russian agenda. So this polarization, I think, is increasingly dangerous for the development of Czech society. I'm quite afraid of it.
I would suggest to open the floor for audience questions. And anybody who would like to be part of the conversation, please raise your hands and our colleagues will assist you with the microphone.
Hello. My name is Yasin Tokat. I am a PhD student in law and political science in Szeged University. I want to ask a question about, it's a general question. Is it that difficult to bring the factual realities into the table and leave the commentaries or emotional political ideologies on the table for people to make? So is it really difficult to make news more about the numbers, the data, and less about the ideology? So then people will have the capacity to form their opinion, maybe. So that's my thought, because if you idealize more and more stuff, then we will end up statu quo. So it will be either named pro-Russian or pro-Western or leftist, communist or Nazi. So isn't it more about bringing the real fact onto the table? Maybe the media can focus on that rather than commenting and getting more emotional or ideological. Thank you.
I think this, what is a real fact? So real fact is an ideology, I think, and it's a dream. The Western philosophy is about this question. Everything but is coming through your eyes, I think, it's my opinion, the real value is because going through you have an opinion about this, you have a knowledge, you have a history, and then you produce your text, your video, your opinion about that question. And is it a fact? I think that you are a human being and you comment something, it can't be a fact because you select that fact is important. And even that you select, I say this fact and this number and not that number. And we all know that you are a PhD student in social sciences. It's just a question which number you pick, and then you can underline this fact, this question a bit more, or you can argument in that direction. So I like this and I think it's a very interesting idea, but it's really a dream, I think. And I am much more happy, and I think the readers are much more happy if they really can see the people who is telling that. And there is media who tell, yeah, I try to be fact-based, but I think, and I'm also one of the thing why I did my PhD is because of this, because I realized that even in science you can scientify everything, and I am more happy that I can say, yeah, I try to be very much fact-based and I try to be very authentic. But look, that's even my view, even if it's an analysis and not an opinion. And I think the readers and everybody who is consuming media should be clear with this. So that's the situation. That's a fact of the world. That's the fact of the existing world around us. And you can change it. And I think you are more happy and you understand the world and how the media is working much better if you are not dreaming, just facts, because facts are also selected by humans, and facts are also created by humans. You know think tanks. A think tank can also interpret something that they measure the one way or another. And it's not because they want to be political, just because they have a knowledge, they have a background, they have a history, why they think this. And I am more happy, and I think this whole society is more happy if we accept that journalists are also human beings. That's why they can't be 100% factual. And a lot of readers, they want to see opinion, they want to see discussions, they want to see the fight of opinions. And then they build their own opinions, and let them build their own opinions. And not just say, yeah, that's fact-based, that's not fact-based, that's fake news, that's propaganda. I think that is what's really much destroying society, especially in Hungary.
Well, I would agree to a large extent, because I would say that there is no such thing as 100% impartial or objective media or objective journalist. But let me add a few perhaps more down-to-earth things to that. First, it's much cheaper to have a newspaper or a website composed of opinion articles than the one composed of fact-based articles, because fact searching takes more time, is more expensive, requires one journalist to sit throughout the whole day or 2 days or 3 days and do a thorough research. Whereas if you have an opinion piece, you can ask an outside cooperator who is a columnist to write for you an opinion piece. He will do that in 1 hour or 1 hour and a half, and you have your content. So it's just cheaper, it's simpler. And that's why if you take a look at the Polish weekly magazines, above all, you will see that they are composed mostly of opinion pieces, not of factual articles. Then another thing is that, as you rightly said, people want emotions, and emotions are raised by opinion pieces, not by factual articles. The problem is that you have fewer and fewer places outside information or political views bubbles in which you could have a real confrontation of ideas or opinions. If you take a look at Polish pro-government media or anti-government media, it's more and more difficult to find a program, a discussion, an interview in which there would be 2 people or 3 people or 4 people disagreeing on things. In most cases, they will agree on almost everything. So this makes no point as far as raising emotions is concerned, or any kind of, useful confrontation of ideas is concerned. So to some extent, you are right. To some extent, you are right. I think that opinion pieces and emotions are needed in the media, but I would like to see much more places in which the owners or those who conduct the programs, who are anchors, would have courage or formal possibility to confront different ideas.
I pretty much agree. The very fact of selections, or the very selection of the fact, is kind of subjective decision. So even if you put in line a few objective data or facts, you somehow choose these facts, and the very process of the selection is subjective, because you put together some facts and you put behind some others. So I think you cannot be completely subjective free. You cannot be 100% objective, even when you write a scientific work, even less in media. And I agree as well with that really emotions are economically very successful for the media. Or is it much easier to be successful, economically successful, with promoting some emotions instead of facts, because if it's cheaper and the impact is much stronger. Just look at the Czech media market, the most popular, with most circulation newspaper is still a tabloid called Blesk. It's all about emotions. It's about some celebrities who who has just married or who died, and what kind of food will be more expensive in coming months. So these media has tried to somehow or to work with fear of people or greed of people and use these emotions for their own profit. I think it's normal, and because the Czech market is small, Czech media market is small, there is maybe more intense stress of these emotions in media. I think it's mistake, but objectively I don't know what to do with that. Maybe one of the reasons why we should have public media, high quality public media in our country is that they are not so susceptible to these emotional messages or emotional news. But even those media, public media, I think are increasingly used in some manner these tabloids like news and information, infotainment, let's call this way. And I think again there is a long-term trend in media, I think not just in the Czech Republic, to be more about fun, to be more about emotions, to be more about infotainment than about really deep analysis, really fact-based analysis.
Thank you.
More questions?
Well, good evening. My name is Boris Figer. I'm the third secretary of the Embassy of Russia. Thanks, all of you, for this fruitful and interesting discussion. And, well, at the beginning of this lecture, you spoke a lot about the influence of the owners of mass media to their line, to their political or ideological line in this mass media. Well, the question is following. Maybe it's primarily to Zoltán, but still, if others can answer, it will be great. The creation of this Central European Mass Media and Press Foundation in 2018, did it influence, according to your opinion, somehow the politics of the agencies that became part of it or not? And are there any examples of such a foundation in your countries? Well, thanks a lot.
Mandines is part of this media foundation. The owner of the company of Mandiner is part of this media. I can tell you, in my case or in our case, it never happened an influence, or we are working like before, and yeah. I never had a phone call or something like that that we should publish this or that article or delete this or that article. Basically, it's going on. I think this whole question, if you look on the Hungarian media market, that's why it's interesting to talk about the foreign ownership in the Hungarian media market and how it developed, because I think with the crisis 2008 and 2009, this whole Hungarian media landscape, the profitability of this whole media landscape gone back, especially if you think on print media. And that is what happened. That is what's happening also in Western Europe. That print media houses, the numbers are going down and down and down, and everybody is thinking how you could sustain and how you could go on with print media. And there is also an international discussion. If you read the current papers in media science, it's a huge discussion. Is it a value to have a printed media? Is it a value that you have printed journals daily, weekly, monthly journals, because mainly, and especially if they are political and they are not talking about celebrity news and whatever, it is very difficult that they have a plus, that they produce a plus. A lot of countries, look the example of Austria or Switzerland, adding funds that print media is keep its existence in their country. So it's a huge question what will happen with print media worldwide, and this Central European Fund is probably one of the answers to this question.
I can just tell you that there is no such entity in Poland.
The same with Czech Republic.
We have time for one last question.
Hi, I'm Lenny. I study here as a master in international relations, and I also have. Social media has become a source of the people right now consume and get more information about our daily life, and and related to that, there are a lot of fake news happen on the social media, but some people they try to talking about their about what happened to their life and about the idea in the politics in the society. And my question is that do you think that a legal restriction on social media is necessary? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not quite certain if I understood you well. Legal restrictions on
social media.
Well, as I think that I have already spoken about that when I spoke about the notions of fake news and hate speech. I argued that these two notions are quite dangerous for the freedom of speech. So I'm not against educating people how to tell genuine news from fake news. Education is okay, but no legal restrictions. And the same thing about hate speech. We all have legal instruments in our civil codes in our countries which allow you to take to court anyone who offends you or you think that he offends you. And in my opinion, that is enough. You don't need, or we don't need, any general legal restrictions on hate speech. That's my opinion.
It's a very difficult question, and I really don't know how to manage my answer, what I give to you. I think it's a wrong direction. That I very much agree with you that it's always a big question. Mondiner has a big comment section that we have a lot of, about 2,000 people comment there in a month. So there is something, they read it and they write there. And there are sometimes 500, 600 comments, and they discuss about this article and about this question. And I think it's very much similar to Facebook and Google. And it's always the question, do we have to make a censorship on that and delete things or not to delete things? So on this part, the human beings, I think they can say what they want to say. If we let them vote, and that's democracy, and I want that we let them vote, then we should let them also say what they think. How it is that we ask their opinion, that which party and how the future of the country should look like, and then we let them vote. But okay, you can tell your opinion because it's don't like this. So I don't support this. On the other hand, if your question was about this, that should we regulate the companies that they can have an influence how they manage the content, the social media content that is produced by their users. I don't know how, but I don't like this tendency that Facebook and Google and Twitter, they just delete something because it's some policies which are, if you read them, they are nothing, they are bubbles, they are just hate speech and so on and so on. There is not such definition. And you can't define such things that you delete. So I don't like this, that these companies are deleting the messages of people, and you really don't understand what are their rules and why they do this or that. So on that, it could be interesting to think about this. I don't know how a country, and these companies are much bigger than a country, how a country could influence this. Germany tried this. Germany is trying to
great controversies.
With controversies, and in the German way that they do it 100%, so they are not much worse in this case than Google and Facebook on itself, but they try it, and it's not very much working. So.
Principally, I'm against any regulations or restrictions from the government officials of media and social media as well. But I'm also against deleting or biasing or some censorship by the social media itself. So I would like to have the situation when there is no regulation, no restriction by the state, and at the same time there is no regulation and restriction from the social media. It is the very freedom of speech. But once there is a increasing bias, as we have spoken about that, towards some leftist or progressivist ideas and opinions, I think there is as well a growing legitimacy for some kind of regulation, just to put it back in balance. And again, I am against this regulation, because once you have one regulation, it's one action, and if there you have reaction and another action, and you are in some circle which is very difficult to get out of it. And it's very damaging and dangerous spiral, even, I would say. So for me, that's a very difficult question as well. So at that time, I am against restrictions and regulations of social media, but I increasingly understand those arguments of those who are in favor of some restrictions in terms of rebalancing the already biased media flow stemming from these social networks, social media. So it's a very delicate question. I don't think I have answered it well right now, but at least this is the direction I am thinking about this very difficult question.
Thank you for our panelists for all the thoughts that they shared, the experiences, the understanding on the topic, and thank you for your attention. In order to stay in touch, please subscribe to our mailing list, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or just visit our website. Upcoming events and the details of that will come soon. Stay in touch. Those who have interpreter devices with them, please return them at the exit, and also throw your filled-in feedback forms in the box at the exit. Have a nice evening, and thank you for the attention.